Father Kit Bautista of the Society of Jesus.
Magiliw, pelas ang sinangalan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiging, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisihin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bukaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdiningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhating pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear God, thank you for gathering us today as one community centered on you. Thank you for the Ateneo that we consider our home. Here we find our place where we belong, where our hearts and souls rest, where we find friends who last forever, where we find our purpose and meaning in our lives. Thank you for the adversities we face, knowing that without them, we cannot grow into our full persons. Life is hard, and it has to be, because without challenges, we remain weak and soft. Teach us to be truthful, for you are in truth, and you are truth. In truth, we find our peace, and we find your peace. The peace that calms our conscience, the peace that soothes our souls, the peace that makes us sleep like a babe at night. In your truth, we see your power, and once we live it, we gain self-confidence and self-worth, not because of us, but because of you. Teach us to follow your truth with courage and humility. Courage to face the enemies of truth, and humility to admit that we can never know the truth without you. Forgive us. Forgive us when we lie, when we become weak, when we are pressured to protect ourselves and become selfish without considering the ill effects on others, when we only satisfy our egos and frustrate our souls, when we become so confused because of our own foolishness. Forgive us when we deceive, when we hide our evil motives and appear to be good to people in order to preserve ourselves. Forgive us when we get too lazy to commit to your truth, when we lack critical thinking, when we believe in fake news and even share them to the world, when we don't take personal responsibility to know the truth and commit to it. All these prayers, Lord, we beg you to bless us through your Son, Jesus, and with the help of our Mother, Mary. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you very much, Father Kit. Good afternoon. I am Estelle Marie Ledrido from the Department of Communication, School of Social Sciences. Welcome home to the Ateneo. We feel quite privileged that you've chosen to spend your Saturday afternoon with us. There is a double meaning to today's conversation title. Galing Ateneo, or from Ateneo, or galing Ateneo, yay Ateneo. Choose your preferred meaning. This is the pilot run, the first episode of this new conversation series organized by the university's Higher Education Cluster in cooperation with the Office of University Development and Alumni Affairs. I come from broadcasting, so I tend to think in terms of episodes, pilots. To open this afternoon's event, please welcome our Vice President for Higher Education, Dr. Marlu Vilches.
Father Bobby, Dr. Bopip, our special guests in whose name this Leong Hall is named, the Leongs, Dr. and Mr. Leong here, our honored presenter who is going to lead the conversation today, faculty, Father Kit, who's also one of the main collaborators in this project, Dr. Randy Tuanyo, the officer in charge of my office this week. Thank you, Randy. Our alumni, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I warmly welcome you to this inaugural Alumni Conversation. Finally, we've got it. We've got our act together. This kind of conversation has long been dreamed of to make it not just a one-off event, but one that is sustainable. This series of conversations is named Galing Ateneo or Galing Ateneo, which can mean a mark of excellence if you say Galing Ateneo. It can also mean from Ateneo, as Michael already said, in the sense of, for me, Ateneo being home, Galing Ateneo. It's a way of bringing our Ateneans back to the hill to find out what's new in this home, to encounter new discoveries in the field or be refreshed with insights from different vistas or be inspired by creative ways of approaching reality or confront current issues that bog the minds and consider various perspectives. Ateneans come home together on many occasions, as we know, a bonfire after a championship, alumni homecoming, Sunday retreats or masses at the Jesu, Holy Week retreats in the entire university, graduation ceremonies, and many other crowd-drawing events. These conversations that we begin today offer another way of bonding together as Ateneans, a different way of triggering curiosity, creativity, and camaraderie. We aim for these to be part of a lifelong learning program for Ateneo alumni and alumni. Thanks to the Office of University Development Alumni Affairs, in cooperation with the School of Social Sciences, we inaugurate the conversation with this one titled History in the Age of Disinformation by Dr. Ambeth Ocampo, eminent historian, cultural administrator, prolific journalist, a National Book Awardee in Essay, Literary History, and Bibliography, a Metrobank Outstanding Teacher Awardee, Assistant Professor of the Department of History with a doctoral degree from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. We often say that a person who is widely known, like Ambeth, needs no further introduction, but I dare say that there is still something that I can contribute to what everyone already knows about Ambeth. When I was a young teacher in this university, one day I found an Ambeth Ocampo in my Philippine literature class in Berkman's Hall. I still remember, in fact, where he was seated, left side, front row, near the teacher's desk. I noted his quiet demeanor, very low-key, as if showing little interest in the lessons. But in fact, came exams, and he revealed the depth with which he had processed key topics from the discussions. While many others may find library research tedious, Ambeth so loved it. He would find things beyond what was required. He would discover details that may have seemed insignificant, but he made sense of these. I said to myself, here's a student that doesn't need a teacher. He just needed a trigger to his curiosity, and then he would go off to find the information and turn this into knowledge. And that didn't surprise me when, fast forward, I found the Ambeth in my class become a big-time historian, journalist, and columnist, writing delightfully about his findings in museums and archives and revealing new insights into historical and cultural information. He makes them come alive, and so those who were taught or continue to be taught history as a dead carcass of the past, and thus static and uninteresting, will have to be rejuvenated when in Ambeth's class, when in reading his opinion column in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, or reading him on social media, or listening to his History Comes Alive lecture series. In his latest book, Cabinet of Curiosities, History from Philippine Artifacts, he wrote in the preface, and I quote, "History need not be confined to the written word. Compared to texts that are voices from a printer or handwritten page, artifacts are mute. Yet, they too have stories to tell, many stories that contribute to a sense of what it means to be a Filipino," end of quote. Ambeth is serving the nation in his most unique way through his works and posts. In 2010, he was conferred one of the highest civilian awards of the Philippines, the Order of Lacandula, rank of Bayani, for his contributions in cultural administration, the popularization of Philippine history, and for having served as chairman of the National Historical Institute from 2002 to 2010, and concurrently chairman of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts 2005 to 2007. He has many other awards and honors that there are too many to mention. But what I can finally say is this: what Ambeth does in championing Philippine history and culture is really not work. It is life, filled with passion, care, and the best of Ambeth's brand of Atenean magis. So, ladies and gentlemen, to give us his take on history in the age of disinformation, please give a round of applause to Dr. Ambeth R. Ocampo.
Thank you very much, Marlu, for that introduction, which sounds like something that will be read at my funeral. But I guess it's nice to hear it while you are alive, and so thank you very much for that. Our talk today is very simple. I called it Liwanag sa Dilim, which is history in the age of disinformation. And before we start, I hope that you will like any of my social media pages. So I'm on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I still have not gravitated to TikTok because I cannot dance like Harry Roque. But when you look for me on social media, I hope you will look, which is why I showed the screen. You have to look for the pages that look like this, because I have realized that since we're talking about fake news, there are a number of fake Ambeth Ocampo pages. I have asked Facebook to take down at least, there were used to be about 20, now there are about 6. And so I took their pictures. They look like real people, no? But I mean, Ambeth Ocampo is not a common name, so we let them be. But anyway, what I will talk about today, it's very, very simple. It will only cover 3 points. No? The first is I want to start with National Book Development Board Reading Survey, which is very, very depressing. And then from there, we will talk about history, no, and history in the age of disinformation. And then in the end, as usual, we wrap up by talking about how these things are relevant. I wish our screens were better, and I hope Dr. and Mr. Leong will give us a new LCD, so you will have better LED, better visuals. Anyway, so we'll get into the readership survey first. When I read this early this year, I was a bit surprised because the figures are very, very bad. So it talks about people who read books in the last 12 months. And as you will see here, in 2023, only 42% were reading. And this actually is very, very bad if you compare it to the pre-pandemic 80%. So what happened from 27 to 2023? 5 years it went down. But what's really most depressing is you look at 2003 when the first survey was done, and you will see that it was 62%, and from 2003 to 2023, it is a downward spiral. So people are not reading anymore, if we are to believe the survey. And then I looked at this, and then it talked about, they also asked people, how do you spend your time? What are your leisure activities? And you will see that number one is watching TV, both for children and for adults. Reading is only, I cannot see it on the screen, but it's very, very low in adults, a bit higher at least in children. So the thing that I see here is that adults do not read as much as they are supposed to read. So adults read less than children, maybe because children are in school. So we associate reading basically with school. And they were asked, how come, what will get you to read? And I'm sorry, the people's excuse for not reading was that there are other things that are more interesting than reading. I don't have the time, etc. And they were asked, so what will get you to read? And then they said, I want things that are easier to understand. The language should be easy. There should be more pictures in the book. The topic should be interesting. So reading is really one of our problems. So Pinoys read for school, which is not a bad thing. But you would think that we read in school so that we will read the rest of our lives. But when you look at it, and this is even more interesting, the readership patterns, when they were asking people, what kind of books do you read? And you will see here that reading is basically connected with school, okay? It goes up from age 11 to 17, sort of peaks at 18 to 24, and then it goes all the way down till you retire at 65. But I was thinking maybe 65, you want to read, like I'm a senior citizen, I want to read, but I cannot read anymore, which is why I tell my students, please read when you can, because me, when you get older, even read, you cannot read as much as you want. So the figures are very depressing. The other thing they asked was, what do Pinoys read? And number one is the Bible, which should be good for Ateneo, right? But I wonder if people actually read it. Number two was picture books, no? And then at the bottom is folk literature, mythology, etc. They asked the people, who is your favorite author? And to the great surprise, the two names that came up was Jose Rizal and Miriam Santiago. And when I looked at it, Dr. Jose Rizal, and he's only 3% of the readership. The other guy who comes out is Balagtas, which means that if they only remember Balagtas and Rizal, these are things you read in school. These are not books you will bring to Boracay, right? And read in the sun. So the survey is very, very, should help understand what people are reading and maybe be able to address what is the problem. This is what I like. I read the survey, sorry, they said, you realize what they say in the survey is not what they actually do. So I said, maybe the survey is wrong, the questions are not well done. Because when they asked them, what do you think of the following statements? And then number one was, books are good gifts. And then more than 85% of adults and 86% of children said books are good gifts. But when they asked them, again, they asked also, reading books is a good leisure activity. So those are the two things everyone said was good. But when they asked them, how many people bought books in the last 12 months, only less than 6% of adults and less than 5. Of course, children don't have money of their own. But the thing there was that they said they're good gifts, but they don't buy. They don't buy books, even as gifts. So the next question was, what is the sweet price for books? What will get people to buy a book? And they found out that the price range was 99 pesos, which doesn't get you much, no? Maybe a Jollibee meal. But the thing there is, this was the painful. Anything over 100 for a book was not something that they wanted to spend for. Then they asked, what is your, if you, 99 pesos yung average, what is your preferred mode of acquisition of a book? Borrowing, which is what I like. So my big question was, I asked, maybe how many borrowed books are actually returned? No, but I mean, it's a good thing. Stealing books and borrowing should be good. They were asked if they were aware that there were public libraries in every municipality. Majority did not know that there were libraries there. The mic's not working. So they asked, where do you get books? Most of them said, we will go to a school library. Okay, that's good. So the thing here is, when you look at it, what were the reasons why they could not go? We're too busy, it's too far. There are many things that, okay, sorry. Again, maybe we can ask Mr. and Mrs. Leong to give us better microphones. Anyway. So the other last thing was that they asked, what kind of books do you read? Do you read digital books or do you read print books? And most of the people said, we want print books. So they're not really into digital things. So the point here now, again, they were asking, most people were still reading printed books. So they asked, what is the device? Do you own a device? And then we found out that majority of the people actually own an Android device. So they are reading basically on their phones. So the conclusion there is that Filipinos in 2023 are reading less than before. And I used to say maybe this is wrong because I'd like to think that people are reading more today than that they have ever read since the Gutenberg Bible was invented. We're always reading on our phones. But the question is, what are you reading on your phone? That is something else. So reading is not just about learning to read. It's not just about literacy. It actually says a lot about why fake news and disinformation proliferates in our society today. The survey said that adults began reading at 16 years old. I find that kind of old to read na. And then they asked children when they began reading. They said they started reading at 9. I think this is very, very late already. So maybe the new education secretary should be looking at this. I think we should be reading earlier. So the saddest part of the thing that came out is that 90% of school children aged 10 struggle to read simple sentences. And that may actually tell us why we actually live today in the age of disinformation. When you look at it, where do people get their news? They get it from their smartphones. They don't read newspapers anymore. They don't read books anymore. In my classes, now they're sort of used to me, but there was one semester, they open on the first day of school, you give the syllabus, and then one of the students actually came up to me and said, are all these things online? I said, no, you have to go to the library. And he looked at me and said, in a rather belligerent fashion, you want me
to go to a library? Yes, it's called the Rizal Library. Go there. And then he says, you want me to handle a physical book? Yes, you have to handle a physical book. And I didn't tell them that sometimes what is on the reading list, I actually hide the book so that they will be stressed out. But it teaches them to go, and go look for a second copy, go somewhere else, find another thing. But that's the thing, we have to get them to go to the library again. So 73% of the Filipinos identified as internet users, and the biggest part is that they're connected basically on Facebook, which isn't the case in the United States anymore. But it is on Facebook where most of our fake news comes. But the thing here is that I want you to realize that although we think it's digital, it comes with the internet, fake news is not new. Fake news is actually as old as history. And I will give you an example. This is William Howard Taft, Philippine governor, first Philippine governor, American governor. He was photographed on a Carabao in 1914. And this is a picture that has appeared everywhere. So when I was looking at how cute naman he rode a Carabao, until we found a picture of him in the White House, on a horse. And when I first saw this picture, the immediate thing that came to mind was the story that Taft, as you know, he was 300 pounds. He found Manila very hot. And it is to him that we owe the road up to Baguio, because it was so hot. So he wanted to go to Baguio, and that's why they built it as a summer capital. In the days before aircon, the whole government moved up to Baguio in the summer. This is Taft's thing. And the only government office that does that is today is still the Supreme Court. They all go up to Baguio in the summer for a few weeks. So when you go up, diba, there's Cabinet Hill where Department of Education, all the departments are there. The president has a house there, which is called Mansion House. And it's actually my mistake. I said, Mansion House, that's redundant. Just call it the Mansion, diba? And I found out the person who built it, William Cameron Forbes, actually had pala a vacation house in the US called Mansion House. So I did not know that, nagkamali. Anyway, what happened here was when one of the trips that Taft went up to Baguio, he cabled the US War Secretary and said, I went up 5,000 feet altitude. I rode on a horse for 25 miles. And the story is that the US War Secretary's reply was, how is horse? Because he was too heavy. But anyway, when you look at it again, let's look at these two pictures. When you look at it, I'm sorry, but you can see very clearly anyway. So the Carabao and the horse here. If you will look at the pants, the pleats on the pants are exactly the same. The folds on the coat are also exactly the same. And so we realized long before Photoshop was invented, they had already created this fake Carabao picture. And the reason we know it is fake is that when you look at the reins go to the mouth of the horse. That lets you guide it left, right, and go straight. When you look at the Carabao, the reins go only to the ear of the Carabao. So something is wrong, and so we have shown that this picture from 1914 is actually made up. Then you have Jose Rizal. You Google Jose Rizal, this is what will come out in any search. And what I did during the pandemic was, I had nothing better to do. Rizal is our most photographed hero. So what I did was I dated all of the pictures and then I put them in a timeline. So you actually see Rizal growing from age 12 till the time that he's a skull, after death. So you see him growing older. So I know all of the pictures of Rizal. But the thing here was, in the Library of Congress, they found this picture, and it is labeled Jose Rizal. Library of Congress cannot go wrong. But if you look at Rizal's picture and you compare, you will know that the hair is the same, but the man on the right is not Rizal at all. It's actually a Mason. It's a early 1900s photograph of a Mason, and it was mislabeled Jose Rizal. But again, people can see it, and yet they believe it is Rizal. And then to complicate things, we have digital manipulation of photographs. And I showed you that with the Taft picture. But what we see here is, when this came out many years ago, I had to be asked because they said this is a long-lost picture of Jose Rizal. And I said, that's not Rizal, that's Pacquiao photoshopped on Abraham Lincoln's body. But people still believed it. I said, just look closely. Ayaw nila tumingin. No? So the thing there is, you compare again the picture that we know of Rizal and you look at that, you will know that it is not the same person. But the funny part is today, you can actually manipulate the picture with an app. So you can change that, or one of my friends who was playing with this even put my picture into results. So they can turn you into anything that you want. Then the other thing that has recently been an issue is deepfakes. So in the university, we're talking about AI. Now we're talking about deepfakes. And I had fun with this during the pandemic. In myheritage.com, you put any picture, and then you can make it move. So that's Rizal moving, the one in the bottom. It's okay for heroes, but I said, I don't want to see a picture of my dead grandmother moving like this. No? But for a historical picture, again, when you see this online, then people will believe it. So the challenges are bigger than ever before. So the point here is, what do we do? Diba? And the big question should be, when I ask my students, why is it that when we talk about heroes, we talk about them in the past tense? It's something to study in history books. But are there heroes today? And sometimes I tell my students, maybe they are still here. But when we talk of heroes, we only think of them in terms of the 19th century. We think of Rizal, Bonifacio, Aguinaldo, Mabini. So I'd like to always tell my students, heroes still abound in the Philippines, but we don't see them because they come in a different shape and form. How should we remember them? Should we remember them only as a 19th century person? Or can we give him better glasses and better hair? And you will see here that it is the same person, but again, he has changed. And then my students said, no, there's something better than that. What? And then they showed me that Rizal looks like this. So the point here is, again, it is changing things, but it is showing you. And this is why I like teaching. And I think this is why when you go and visit your teachers, they say we always look young, because it is constant contact with young people. And it is through young people. I always tell my students, I learn more from you than you learn from me, because you open your world to me, and I see the world from your eyes, and I see how differently sometimes they look at the past, the present, and the future. So the thing here is, history is about fact, history is about fiction. Our young people today like to watch things. I mean, when they watch The Queen, I had to explain to them that it's based on history, but all that dialogue is made up. So the events are the same, but the way it is dramatized shows you. So it's a critical way, and this is the way that they're growing up. They're growing up with media. They're watching General Luna, Goyo. So they're too lazy to read the books, but they will watch it. But if they don't watch it critically, then they get into trouble. So just like General Luna, when people ask me, what do you think of this film? What did you think of Gombursa? I said, they're not documentaries. Historical films are not doctoral dissertations. They have to be watched as a film. And we have Maitel and Matek here from Com Department who will tell you that. We need film literacy. We need visual literacy. But in General Luna, the thing that went viral was this. There was a tweet about somebody who watched the film, and on their way out daw, the girlfriend asked her boyfriend, bakit nakaupo lang si Mabini sa buong sine? Diba? And the guy who played Apolinario Mabini, Epi Quizon, tweeted, and of course blamed all the history teachers. What are the history teachers teaching? Diba? Bakit hindi niyo kilala si Mabini? Don't you know that he's the sublime paralytic? But when I look at it, if you looked at that tweet, you will see the answers. Bakit nakaupo si Mabini? Kasi pagod, di ba? Bakit nakaupo si Mabini? Tamad, di ba? And then somebody said, mas kilala si Professor X of the X-Men who's in a wheelchair than Mabini. So when I looked at it, again, it shows you they don't know anymore. And maybe they have to learn a little bit of history. But for me, Mabini is more important because many years ago, these were my mentors, the late Teodoro Agoncillo on the right and Emilio Aguilar Cruz on the left. We were in the National Library. They were looking at the statue of Mabini down. And then somebody said, that's the sublime paralytic. And then the other one said, ay, from the sublime to the syphilitic. And then they laughed. And then I said, why are you laughing? And they said, alam mo, kaya nalumpo yan, may syphilis si Mabini. And, I believed that for many years. And it seems that the national artist F. Shonil Jose also believed it. So when you read his novel Puon, Mabini had syphilis. So when I talked to him, the new edition before he died actually credits me and says, we know now in 1980 that when they dug up Mabini's remains, this is what they looked like. They arranged it like a jigsaw puzzle. They found out that his paralysis was caused by polio, not by syphilis. And so this would have been the end of the story. But then I tried to trace where the story came from. Where did this rumor come from? And I found out that it came from the Malolos Congress. Because they did not like Mabini, so they had to destroy his reputation. So they created this story of the syphilis. And this being July, if you read Mabini today, you will see what it is like. He had to appear before the 19th century version of the Committee on a Commission on Appointments. Aguinaldo appointed him Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And when he appeared, the commission didn't even look at his academic qualifications. They just said, you cannot be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Mabini said, why not? And then they said, because you are lame. And Mabini's reply was, does the job entail a lot of walking? And so they did not approve him. So the point here, Mabini came back, told Emilio Aguinaldo, this commission on appointments, you know what will happen here? No one will be appointed except the people who are in cahoots with the congressmen. And if you cannot appoint people that you can trust and you only get the people they approve, you will be useless. When I read that, I said, this sounds very much like what's happening today. And it made me realize that Mabini was not being prophetic. It's the sad fact that the Philippines has not changed very much since Mabini's time. But they always say Mabini saw all our problems before. It's not true. We have not changed very much in 2,000 years. And so we must look at it. That's why we have history in school, to help people gain perspective. We have this film, Gombursa, very nicely done, helped by the Ateneo. Fortunately, they did not ask the history department. But there were many things that came out. We found out that there were things that were real and things that were not real. So I told them, you have to read on Mabini, on Gombursa. Don't just watch the film. And of course, you have to read the works of the late John Schumacher, who gives us everything. But the thing here again is, before the pandemic, there was a quiz show, Pinoy Big Brother. They asked the kids, what is the acronym of Father Jose Burgos, Jacinto Zamora, and Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora? The answer is Gombursa. But the girl answered Majoha, which is more complicated kasi that's Mariano, Jose, and Jacinto. But the thing is, they said, how come nobody knows Gombursa anymore? Nobody knows that Mabini is the sublime paralytic. So ABS-CBN brought the kids to the Ayala Museum. So they gave them to me for an hour. They took the test again, they got 98%. So I'm a better teacher. But the thing there is, it showed you, I saw that they were not stupid. They were kids who were interested. It's just that maybe they were stressed out in the contest. So if you look at it, This is the page from Jose Rizal's El Filibusterismo. You will see here the reason why I say, why are you always looking at that? I said, you look at the detail, which everyone doesn't notice. He started with, he wanted to write second part of the Noli. He erased it and wrote continuation of the Noli. It's the same, right? But I'm sure he meant something by changing that. And then you will see it. If you read the Noli he described as a Tagalog novel, Novela Filipina. The Fili he describes as a Filipino novel, a Filipino Novela Filipina. So I see from 1887, from the Noli to 1891 to the Fili, what crystallized in Rizal's head was the concept of nation. It's not just thinking of Tagalog, Kapampangan, Ilocano. He started to think in terms bigger than himself. But the thing here is, if you look at it, he dedicated the book to the three priests, Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora. So this is the handwritten version. Now, when you look at it, he corrected it. He wrote Francisco Gomez. When he printed it, he corrected it. It was already Mariano Gomez, although the correct spelling is Gomez with an S. And then he didn't know the date of the execution, so it was blank in the handwritten, but in the printed, he gave the date as February 28, 1872. Then he gives us trivial information, the ages of the three priests. So Gomez was, according to Rizal, 85. He was actually only 73. Burgos was actually 35, not 30, and Zamora was 37, not 35. And the date is wrong. So the point here is, just because he is Rizal does not mean that he is correct all the time. But what we are taught in school is that history is taught by memorization. History is taught to instill not critical thinking, but blind adherence to authority. What the teacher says is correct. What your textbook says is correct. When the whole idea of history is to question everything and you validate it for yourself. Now, this is the earliest picture of Gomburza. So we have Gomez, we have Burgos, and we have Zamora. This is 1918. And I always thought that the three priests were never photographed together. I thought this was fake, just like the Taft picture, until the internet produced this one. So it's not only three, there are two more. And we don't know who they are. So they said this one's Father Pelaez. So something is, it makes you wonder where the images, where our history comes from. The funny part is that because the National Historical Institute has placed them on the covers of the Noli and the Fili, people think that this picture with the three priests is real. So if you go to the National Library, you will see that the Noli Me Tangere has that cover drawn by Rizal, but the cover of the Fili is blank. But people always believe it has those three. So it shows you how, over time, we learn many things that are not correct, either consciously or unconsciously. So the big question we should ask is, how do we remember the past? What do we remember about the past? What should we remember about the past? And history is always about remembering, but I tell my students, sometimes history is also about forgetting. What do we forget? So these are things that I want to bring into the conversation today, and some things that I leave you to think about when you leave this hall and go through your life tomorrow. So history is more than memorization. History is actually a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It is about understanding the past. And not just understanding, but more importantly, it's about empathy. It is being able to feel the way that all people in the past feel. So in 1872, history tells us that execution of Gomburza. All the kids know this, or at least they're forced to know this. But the thing what we should remember is this. Rizal says that without Gomburza in 1872, I would have become a Jesuit, and I would never have written the Noli Me Tangere. this is not true, because if he applied, he wouldn't have been accepted. Um, and then number two, would he have written the Noli? Maybe not. But that's what, I mean, sometimes we just have to take his word for it. But the thing there is, in the 1960s, the nationalist historian declared that there is no Philippine history before 1872. He says everything before 1872 is the history of Spain in the Philippines. We are just maids and houseboys and drivers. We do not have any agency. But he says from 1872, our history goes forward. I think Agoncillo said that because he didn't want to research before 1872. But it was something that changed the way in which people thought. But I think this is something that the late O.D. Corpus taught me, and it is something that I hope you will think about. And it shows you how we change the way we look at it. We think of 1872 as Gombursa, but where were our heroes? In 1872, Rizal was 11, Bonifacio was 9, Mabini was 8, Luna Antonio was 6, Aguinaldo was 3, Emilio Jacinto and Gregorio del Pilar were not yet even born. What does this tell us? That in 1872, our heroes of the 19th century were children. They grew up in the fear of 1872. And after that, their generation became the most fantastic generation in Philippine history. They seem to have known each other. And we have never seen that barkada replicated again. But when they got older, when you look at it, Rizal finished the Noli when he was 26. You've seen the spoliarium. It is this big. Juan Luna made the spoliarium at age 27. Emilio Aguinaldo, who's the hero we all love to hate, right? He was the president of the Republic at 29. When you think about it, college dropout, he's not very bright, and yet he became president of the First Republic. When you think about it, he fought a war against Spain and fought a war against the United States of America. What does a 29-year-old Filipino do today? Will he or she be able to do the same thing? So people get upset when I said, 29 years old, they're in a call center or they're in a Starbucks. It's a different generation, but this helps us understand what the generation is like. Oh, just another thing, because I like looking at detail, as Marlo tells you. We only see this picture of Aguinaldo. It's always cropped. But when you look in the back, there's a photo bomber in the back. So sometimes even the pictures we have to question and to keep looking. The oldest person in that generation was Andres Bonifacio, who started the revolution at 32. Still quite young. So when you think about it, most of our heroes of the 19th century were below 40. So it shows you that even today, the Philippines is a country with very young people. Our strength, our future is in our young people. And that's why we have to teach them history, to give them critical thinking. So the point here is, when they get critical thinking, they will argue from fact, not from opinion. It's all not, naramdaman ko ganito, anong feeling mo? No, that's the thing that always comes out. So the thing here is, they should be able to form conclusions based on fact and not on emotion. So we go to the thing called historical revisionism. And I get upset about this because everyone used to say, revisionism, this is the Marcoses rewriting our history. And I said, the reason why Philippines is the way that it is, because we cannot even get our terms correct. It's not historical revisionism, because to revise means to re-examine, to reread, to make something wrong correct. You never revise to make something wrong. So when we say historical revisionism, it's not the way that we want it to do. The correct term should be distortion. But that's not the way. You see, we use it almost mindlessly. So the point here is, some years ago, I was bashed for saying, history was not chismis. It was quite interesting, but the upside of it, thanks to Father Bobby, there was support not just for me, but support for the profession. History was under attack, and the Ateneo stood not just for the discipline, but also for truth. That was the other thing, that silly girl was saying, Ambeth Ocampo, you should respect my opinion. And I could only say, stupidity and falsehood is never respected. It is called out and it is thrown out. No, but that's the thing. That's the way that we are doing things today. So the thing here is, when Rappler checked the great trolling of me, they found out that all the things, the things that came out on social media were exactly the same. They just came from 6 Marcos Duterte websites. So it was targeted, it was intentional, and I was saying, if you can do that to me, you can do that to other historians. So these were all the websites that so it shows you how dangerous it can actually be. Then I got even. That's why people call me Patola. Because, people will say something like, paano mo alam na history? Nandun ka ba o chismis lang yan? So my reply, 1896 po ang revolution. Di pa ako tao noon. Si Enrile lang ang nandoon. Gusto ko happy ka. And then, I would write, people would ask me, ano yung syunga? Because I said, if I write tanga, gago, or a bad word, the AI of Facebook will cancel me. But it didn't know what syunga was. So that's what I would do would be, I would answer, take a screenshot, and then block them so they cannot answer again. No, but the thing here was it was so crazy, no? Dilaw na historian ka. Oh, and then mabuti na lang dilaw kaysa bulag at syunga tulad mo. No? So this was the way in which we got it. It was very a very nice feeling actually to get even. But that's something that is now a thing of the past. So the point here is historical revisionism we need, but it is always based on truth and not on falsehood. What saddened me was this private message from a public school teacher who said that your name cannot be mentioned anymore in our your name is taken out of all the modules because you are controversial. So it's sad, actually, that this is the way, and we hope the new education secretary will fix it. So what do I tell my students and what's my advice for us today? You must be curious. I was curious to see how big the Rizal Monument was. I went up. No, the people, they didn't think I would go. And as you can see, I don't go to the gym. So they had to harness me and pull me up. But I was able to see it, so up close. And then I could see how big my hand, because when you look at it, it looks small. Malaki pala siya when you go and look at it. So it's that. I always tell my students to ask. You should always ask questions. And that's what we learn from Ateneo, Philo, and theology. You ask questions because sometimes the questions can be more important than the answers. It gives us a way to think and deal with questions. So, what should we do about it in this fight for truth and disinformation? Who should we believe? Okay. One of my things I've been working on for the longest time is the edition of Ferdinand Marcos's diaries. I gave it to the Ateneo Press, but they were under Carina Bolasco. She was horrified because it will be 5 volumes. She says, can you just choose the interesting parts? I said, but if I choose the interesting parts, people will say, you removed the things that... So I said, we either print it whole or not at all. So anyway, Marcos actually left us with a handwritten record of his life from 1970 to 1984. I have that. But the thing here is, of course, this is Marcos's view. It sometimes it's self-referential, it is lying in many parts, so I don't think the Marcoses will object to my printing it. But the thing here is, you see here in September 22, 1872, Secretary Juan Ponce Enrile was ambushed in Wakwak. But all our textbooks say that martial law was declared on September 21. This is the evening of 22. Wala pa. He just says because he was ambushed, he says, now martial law is inevitable. But the point there is, we know about the ambush. And in 86, Enrile said, no, that's not true. We just made that up so that we could declare martial law. And then many years later, when he wrote his memoir, he said, no, it's real. So which Enrile do we believe? The 1972 Enrile or the post-86 Enrile? One person giving us two different versions of the same event. So who should we believe? What should we believe? Okay, and I'm very happy, no? BBM says teach history, but what kind of history are we going to teach? Let's go back to September 21, 1972. I found that in November of 1972, Ferdinand Marcos delivered an extemporaneous speech to the Philippine Historical Association. Some of the officers were his teachers, and it was published in the Journal of the Philippine Historical Association. Nobody reads it kasi Marcos di ba? But when I read it, the speech was very interesting because they asked him, when was martial law actually declared? And Marcos said, this is the first time I'm telling you this. He says, I signed 2 copies of the martial law decree. And he said it was supposed to be signed on September 17 kasi he likes the number 7, right? But it is dated September 21 because it is 3 times 7. So the thing there is, there are 2 copies pala and it's post-dated. So when he talked to the people, then he also said, if by proclamation is meant my appearing on TV and saying martial law is declared, then it's September 23. So this is the document that says September 21, but when you look at it, it was signed on September 17, post-dated September 21, and forced in the evening of September 22, and was formally proclaimed on the 23rd. So as you can see, a fact in our textbooks is more complicated than we actually think. And this is Marcos himself speaking. So, where do we find this? I hope you can go one day to the Rizal Library. I've been working, thanks to Marlo, to reassess what we have in our special collection, something that has been put under the rug for so many years. They were so busy building the new building, they neglected our special collections. What is in our special collections there? The jewel of the Ateneo is not in the new building, it's all in the old building. When I brought some students there, this is the American Historical Collection, they showed a photograph. And it was a long photograph. And the kids were shown, you can see the amazement on his face. This is a picture, and we had to explain. This is what panoramic actually does, because they know how to do it on their phone, but they didn't know what it was like, taking a picture of a panorama in 1900. So the point here is, they learned many things. They looked at old newspapers, and they look at it, nobody reads newspapers anymore. They read it online. So they were showing them not only old newspapers, but how these old newspapers are being restored, cleaned, and digitized. And then we have the pictures. Do you recognize this kid? That is Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and Ferdinand Marcos Jr. We have the archive of the Manila Times. It was closed, and the late Doreen Fernandez bought the archive, which is all the pictures before 1972. She lent it to Mr. and Miss, which was the anti-Marcos paper, and eventually it found its way to the Ateneo. So we have that, what the Philippines was like before 1972. Again, you see that, little Bongbong and the father, the family in another time, in another age. You have pictures again of Bongbong, visiting 1972. They're on their way. They went to the Vatican, and so all these pictures are there, waiting to be unearthed and waiting to give us the truth that we can find. We also have, I hope some of you went before the talk, we have a small exhibit of the treasures of the Rizal Library, The oldest book that we have is 18th century. This is a passport which was issued by William Cameron Forbes to himself. He was the governor. The passport is this big. It's like a diploma, and you fold it and put it in your pocket. But it's really amazing to see these things. We have books from the American period. This is what they taught us. Look, amin o ating bandila, and it's the stars and stripes. Iniibig ko ang ngalan ni Washington. No? So that's how we were taught, and that's how colonization came about. The special collections is not just there for books, but it shows us that we are actually stewards of important cultural property. These are the 3 books that you will see when you enter the Rizal Library. These are first editions of the Noli, the Morga, and Rizal's El Filibusterismo. They're just there. But when you look at auction results, the Fili was sold for 2.3 million pesos. The Noli was sold at auction for, how much was it? Over 2 million pesos also. So the big question is, it's valuable, it's just there. Are we taking care of it? Is it insured? Do we put it in a vault? We don't know. Then we have the Biak na Bato papers. They're now displayed. You will see there, the Pact of Biak na Bato, Emilio Aguinaldo, the actual papers are in the Rizal Library. It actually also gives us the accounts of what they bought, how much they paid. It's all there waiting to be written. There's a small sketchbook with sketches by Juan Luna, which people have never seen. Again, that is in the Rizal Library. This is Luna sleeping. We actually have, if you go to the archives, this is the statue of the Sacred Heart that Rizal carved when he was a student in the Ateneo. Now, I'll give you some Ateneo trivia. I think I invented this, but you might as well know. I always ask my students, what is our theology school called? Anyone? Loyola School of Theology, right? Because the Jesuits have a big devotion to the Sacred Heart. I tell them that the original name would have been the Sacred Heart Institute of Theology. But if you get the acronym, it will spell something. So it became Loyola House. So anyway, so that's that. That's the story of this statue. We have a bust of the late Horacio de la Costa made by the national artist Federico Alcuaz, who we know as a painter, but he was a wonderful sculptor. We have actually the fragments of Rizal's brain, which is also in the university archive. In the Aliu, which is the Library of Women's Writings, you have all sorts of writings on women. The most depressing being the notebook of Rosa Henson, the first woman who came out as a comfort woman. She not only wrote, she actually drew what happened to her as part of her healing. So this actually is more than a document. It tells us a lot about a person. We have the papers of Jose Garcia Villa, who we already know as a poet. Yung pala, he was also a painter. So there are things that are there. So we have all sorts of things. Zarzuela scripts, more Zarzuela scripts by Aurelio Tolentino. And most importantly, we have the papers of Juliana Goricho, who is the ill-fated mother-in-law of Juan Luna. She wrote recipes of what she was serving in Europe. So you'll see this. In October 1891, she served albondigas, which is meatballs, right? But you will look at the date. It says, today, Sunday, 11 October 1891, the people who ate in the house was Rizal, Canon, Vergel, and Ventura. So you will see, in the other one, it's Sotanghon. So this is a 19th century Cavite woman trying to replicate the taste of the Philippines in Paris in the 1880s. So I was saying maybe our next conversation should be, we will ask the Cordon Bleu to recreate these recipes, and we will be able to physically taste what our heroes ate. So it is quite interesting to look at old papers, which people think are just there. So the other thing here, okay, is pictures that we have from Pardo de Tavera that showed you what life was like in the 19th century. And there we find a picture of Father Burgos on the right. But the most interesting thing is this. This is Juan Luna and Paz Pardo de Tavera on their wedding day. As you know, Luna killed his wife and his mother-in-law. So this is the actual picture in the Ongpin collection, but if you go to Pardo de Tavera, this is the picture. They tore out Luna's head. So it also shows you how even an archive can also be, how do you say this, curated or edited depending on who is collecting it. And just to show you another one, this is kind of nice. They not only tore him there, you have this, and the text says, a picture of my mother, and my sister Paz, our friend, Spanish friend Ledesma, and LDL, Borrado, LDL. So this is Luna's wife, Luna's mother-in-law, Ledesma, their friend, and Luna is there in the back. They erased him from history. So, because they couldn't tear him out, so they just covered him. So it shows you again, all these things that we can learn. Now we have the Arturo Rotor papers in the Rizal Library. And it's interesting because not only was this man a doctor, there's an orchid named after him. The only medical condition named after a Filipino is the Rotor syndrome that's named after him. He was Quezon's physician. And when they were in Washington, every day Quezon would meet the government in exile, and he told Rotor, do not take notes. But in the evening, he typed them out. So we have it all in the Rizal Library, and it will tell you many things that will change the way you look at our heroes. And this is a picture of all of them in Quezon Suite. As you can see, he's in very bad shape. That is Dr. Rotor here taking notes. So the thing here, it will tell you, he talked to me about an hour about anti-imperialism. So even the notes of conversations with Quezon is all there. So the special collection of the Rizal Library, which I hope you will visit, and we are constantly improving, will be something that will spur research and create new scholarship. And it is this collection which is also the light in the age of disinformation. So, the library which you went to for aircon is actually an oasis of curiosity, enjoyment, and reflection. And I hope you come and visit it. So finally, I'm sorry this is very long, why history in the age of disinformation? Okay, history is not taught anymore every year. Just to show you how bad it is, Philippine history is taught in grade 5. And it is not taught ever again until you come to college. So that means there's 7 years between the grade 5 class and my freshman class in the Ateneo. What do you teach a grade 5 student? Just fairy stories. You cannot give them complicated things. So if they don't come to college, what they have is a grade 5 version of Philippine history. So we have to reorient it. Then they watered it down by calling it Araling Panlipunan. So it's a mixture of everything and nothing. So it's not history. What they are actually teaching them is civics, how to be a good citizen. And that's not history. History is about questioning. History is about knowing. And the way that we're teaching it, we're always teaching it as an informative subject, who, what, when, where, when actually history is more a formative subject. And this is something I guess I got from the Ateneo, that you can use your courses not just to teach the mind, but also to educate the heart. So the point here is history teaches us to look closely, to connect broadly, to think critically, and hopefully, and this is what the Jesuits teach us, to express clearly, probably with wit and some humor. So the thing here is, let's go back and look at what history actually is. Historia in Spanish, histoire in French, Geschichte in German, Historia in Tagalog. It comes from the Greek word historie, which doesn't mean history, it actually means inquiry, meaning knowledge from inquiry, which is why question, answer, that is the way in which we learn. When we look at Tagalog, we will see that history, historia, it comes from the word, Spanish word historia. It talks about a story or a narrative. When you look at the old dictionary, 1794, I looked at the translation of historia, it was salita. And then I said, ay, salita, word, what is that? And I couldn't understand it, no? Even in the 1832 Jesuit dictionary, historia is still salita, historia, please cuento. It's a story. So I knew about it. But this is nice. In the 18th century, it showed the usage of salita. History is magaling na salita, a good story. And then ito, anong salitang dala mo? What story do you bring? Walang katapusan ang salita mo at walang punot dolo. Your story has no end, it has no beginning and end. Doesn't make sense. So when I saw that, I realized that salita is a spoken word. Pinoys are marites by nature. They don't read. We like to talk. Maybe that is one of the things that we should look. But when I saw this in the Jesuit dictionary, it says, Historia Salita, and then there was a little thing, it said historieta. And historieta was monting salitang walang kasaysayan, a small story with no meaning. And you will see there, kasaysayan does not mean history, kasaysayan means sense or meaning. So it gives us a deeper understanding of what history means and what history should be about. So kasaysayan is not just the story or the salaysay, it is sense or meaning. It is the saysay in our history. So the point here is, I used to say, let's change the word kasaysayan and call it kaagi. The Cebuano word for history means the road that you have passed. Nobody listens to me, no? So it's still kasaysayan. So the point there is history, and in the Ateneo, I'd like to think my colleagues are very good storytellers. So if you had you think history is bad or boring, you had a bad teacher. You did not come to Ateneo. The thing there is you have to realize, and this is what I've been talking about past 40 minutes, the real magic of history is not in the research. The real magic of history lies in connections. And that is how Ambeth Ocampo works. I see one thing and I connect it to 10 different things. It doesn't stop with the basic fact. It lies in many connections. And more importantly, the true magic of history lies in its relevance. It is not only connecting. If people cannot find relevance in the history, it has no power to move people or to change lives for better or for worse. So the point here this afternoon in our conversation is we're talking about history. We're talking about the age of disinformation. At its very root is truth, and at its very root is relevance. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ambeth. So the floor is now open for your questions, your comments, things that you'd like to share. All right. Please approach the microphone closest to you. For those who are joining us online, please type your questions out on the chat. Kindly introduce yourself before you present your question.
Hi, Dr. Ocampo. My name's Engineer Gian Miranda, RCHD. So I'm from the University of Santo Tomas. I graduated 2023. And first of all, it's an honor. I really like your talk. I'm an avid fan of history. However, I have some few points coming from the field of engineering. So maybe it will be interesting for you. So one is the utilization of technology. I've observed that you don't like technology when it comes to history. Is that true?
Not that I don't like it. I actually use it a lot of the time. In the University of Michigan, if we did not have technology, I was just there for 6 weeks. And because of technology, I can read a document that is old, I can enhance it, I can enlarge it, I can crop it, which I cannot do with a physical manuscript. So technology actually helps us to make things easier. It crunches data very quickly, more quickly than doing it by hand. So don't get me wrong, technology is actually very important in the study of history.
Well, yes, indeed, the technology helps us create things better. It makes our lives easier. However, when it comes to consuming history through technology, well, it's important that we must be media literate. So, and we must be also good consumers of using technology and in the internet. The problem when it comes to Filipinos is that what they see is that, well, they see is what they see, and they don't dwell on, they don't inquire, as per se what you said in history, and whatever that they've given or whatever they've seen. We live in an age of technology that everything is instant. We have Google, we have Yahoo, we have, well, YouTube, and now TikTok. All of my friends in the engineering field, I've been asking them, what do you do in your hobbies, your spare time? TikTok. So, well, these things is, well, bound to happen. However, I have some few friends that are still reading. And what I mean is that it's quite scary for me that we are transitioning in the field of technology. Now, may I ask, what are your opinions with regards to these concerns?
Okay. The point there is, and the point of the talk was basically being critical. So whether you use technology or not, it is important to be able to question things, to validate information that you get, find the truth as you think possible, and not just to get things as easily as it comes. No? So my students normally, when they're looking for something, they'll Google instead of going to the library. So the Google gives you something, but normally they'll just look at the first thing that comes out. But because I come from I was born in the last century, so I'm old. So I go through all the results until Google cannot give me anymore, and I choose the best one possible. So the point there is the technology is there, but the way in which we think of things, the critical way in which we use the information, that faculty has always been the same, no matter what you use.
So based from your answer, the challenge of consuming media is the rigor of inquiring and testing data. Now, if I may ask, how do you encourage your students? Well, I'm not your, I'm not your student, but how do you encourage people in general to be critical thinkers or critical researchers when it comes to consuming data now in this day of age?
Okay, so let's give some people a chance to ask a question, so we can continue this after. But how do we do it? I guess if you listen to today's lecture, it was all about that. It was all about being critical of what we read, critical of what we see, and always to find truth, not just in history, but in everyday life.
That will be all, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. It was very challenging. I enjoyed it. And thank you for your questions, sir. I enjoyed it as well. I just have two. One is, from my own experience of teaching in the liberal arts field, both in the United States and here, the phenomena of what we used to call the corporatization of education. I mean, we even see it here in Ateneo with all the corporate names. But the idea is that these curriculum become very, what you were talking about, more regurgitative, very specific. They don't deal with original texts. It's textbooks, now it's technological AI tools. So my first question is, how does that influence the teaching, not just in the sense of policy formation, but the teaching of history, but also the marginalization of teaching of history? I mean, just to give an example, I'm not in the field of history, but I've been in schools as a part-time teacher, given the last minute the job of teaching history. Dayuhan ako, there was one time I had to teach Philippine history. the other guy quit. So there's a lack of investment there. My other question, just real quickly, is the inability to deal with and analyze conflict. We tend to, as a result of this corporatization of education, we tend to demonize overanalyze. And so we look at, well, there's truth and then there's lies. But in reality, when we dig deeper, there's more a question of like policies and ideological conflicts. And ideology is not a dirty word, but it does have its conflicts. So those are my two questions. The influence of policy that extends beyond corporate influence in policy making, educational policy making, and also the result of that, the inability to deal with discursive conflicts and analyze them as part of those critical tools. Thank you.
Okay, number one is, teachers have to take a licensure exam, but it's the content. Like, they usually think history is something anyone can teach. You give them the textbook, that's it. They won't ask me to teach calculus, right? Or science. They will get someone who actually specialized in it. But it's the sad fact that they think history is something you can just get out of a book. They miss the point. History is not just about all events. It is actually about sense. It is about meaning, about finding meaning in the past so that that past can actually change. But that's what I think is one of the things that's wrong with Philippine education. It's not just rote. It is teaching students blind respect for authority. History is not like that. History properly taught will teach you to become critical. And if citizens are critical, they become difficult. So I guess that's the way our educational system works. No? The second thing, it's the question of, what do we do? Why is it regurgitative? The challenge is becoming more complicated. Like now, I just finished my syllabus to deal with AI. Last semester, telling my students, you must tell me if you use AI so that I know. You just have to be. But now I realize that we just have to change the whole way we're teaching, because especially literature, history, AI can make an abstract of any text you feed it. So I'm telling my students, yes, you use AI. It's the machine that read it. It is not you. I remember when I was teaching in Japan, I would flash the assignment, and a Jurassic person like me are writing in the notebook. Nobody had notebooks. It was a sea of cell phones that came out, and they were taking pictures. And that's when I realized, you take a picture, it's in your phone. It is not here. So I always tell them, you may think it's Jurassic, but even just physically writing, what you write actually goes into your head more than taking it with your phone. And so again, it's adjusting. Technology is not really a bad thing. I think AI can be used in education, but the thing there is how to responsibly use it, how to use it in the way we are teaching today. Maybe it's also a way for us to change our mindset in the way in which we are teaching, assessing, and doing education on the thing. It's a big question which the university is addressing, and in our faculty, annual faculty things, it comes out. So we're getting there, but technology is always 3 steps ahead. I'd like to think we're addressing it. Yes, Mr. Leong, and then.
My name is Ricardo Leong. I graduate of Fordham University. After hearing what you say, that there's no truth in history. So we should not even talk about history. History is just something people think of. So there's no truth in it. That's my feeling after attending your talk.
Okay, I think you got it. Well, you got part of it right. There is truth in history, and we have to find it. What I'm saying is that sometimes what you are teaching, it's not enough to read a book or to listen to your teacher tell you something. You have to validate it for yourself, which means in the end, there is truth somewhere, but it has to be found. It is not given to us. So history is a complicated subject in that, something like, when was martial law declared? September 21. That's what your history book tells you. But when you see the sequence, you will see that it's more complicated than the thing. But there is a truth somewhere. Martial law was declared. When? When did he think about declaring it? When it was actually promulgated? And what were the effects of it? Those are truths that cannot be denied. So it is history in effect, I think, is important because it teaches us that, to look for truth in all its forms, to validate things and not to take things at face value. You can in the end, which is why we validate. Well, yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, you will find it, but it's better than not looking for it. Truth can be found always. Maybe we don't know when, but it is the. But that's the point. I mean, it's not looking for it is part of the journey. If we stop and do not look for truth, then we have stopped living, I think. We end. There's always an end to a journey. But sometimes the journey is more interesting than the end. But it is that. It is a process that all students should learn, actually, is to go through that journey, whether they get to the end or not. Which is why they say education is a journey. It is not a destination. So that, I guess, is the whole point of why we go to university. We can discuss it more later.
We have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Sir, hello. My name is Reg Valentina. I graduated from here back in '08. My question is, I was watching the news a few days ago, and there was this Mr. Gringo Honasan, who was one of the protagonists, I suppose, of the EDSA revolution, and he was being interviewed on TV and asked how he viewed the whole thing of taking down the former dictator, and he said that no, that's not what we were doing. We were going to the palace to protect them, because if the mob went there, de paano na? Parang ganon, di ba? So me, as a kind of an older person, saw this, and I'm going, teka lang. What should we, a normal, regular person, do? We have nothing at stake, so we're not being attacked naman directly, so we can't patola every single comment. So what can we do? But this is misinformation, most likely. So what can we do when we witness these historical distortions? Thank you.
And that's the whole point of validation. So Gringo Nasan will say, I was there, this is what happened. So that's what he said, I don't know when, recently, but in '86, it was very clear. Their orders were to kill the Marcoses. So it would end, just kill them all, not even to take them alive for trial, just to kill them so that we start. It's like the French Revolution, you start on a new foot. So again, it's that. And that's why history is there to give us not only truth, but also perspective, to be able to see things. When I first met Mr. Leong on a plane, I gave a talk in the University of Hawaii on the Marcos Diaries. And there was a little old lady in front who didn't agree. She was the first to ask the question. She says, how dare you say that the Marcoses fled Malacanang in 1986? We did not flee. We were kidnapped by the Americans and brought here against our will. And of course, she's there. That was her version of the facts. And so I just said, ma'am, if you had stayed there and the mob had gotten in, you probably would not be alive to say this today. And I said, all the records tell us that you were not kidnapped, you were actually saved by the American choppers that brought you out. So again, it's many different. I mean, that's why history is difficult, because it's different points of view, different versions of the same thing. So I used to ask the late Teodoro Agoncillo, you're so lucky, you knew Aguinaldo, you knew whoever. How do you tell the truth? How do you tell if one person is telling the truth? And Agoncillo said, that is the task of the historian. When you look at everything, and then you will find who among your sources is the most truthful, and you make a narrative based on what truth can actually be. So it's follows up to Mr. Yong's question. It is complicated, to use a Facebook term. Yes, please.
Hello po. Ako po si Christian James Gutierrez, isang mag-aaral ng kasaysayan mula sa Politeknikong Universidad ng Pilipinas. May dalawa lamang po akong tanong. Yung una po, sa gitna po ng laganap na distortion sa kasalukuyan at ang profesyon po natin ay tila nawawala ng halaga sa iba ngayon, ano po ang maipapayo nyo para sa mga kagaya ko na narito pa rin sa field na ito na tumatahak po ng ganitong pag-aaral po? Yun po muna yung unang tanong.
Ano yung pangalawa?
Yung pangalawa po, napanood ko po kasi many times na yung video nyo sa National Book Development of the Philippines, yung tungkol po sa library ninyo. And I'm always amazed dun sa dami po ng libro ninyo. But yun nga po, bilang mag-aaral ng kasaysayan, sa mga kurso na lamang na meron po tayo, tambak na tayo ng mga babasahin na parang nakaka-overload na sa mga information, gaya na lang din ng mga article na sinusulat nyo na meron tayong information overload na sa panahon na ito. Pwede nyo po ba kaming bigyan ng how you read your books po? Kasi parang ang dami, paano ba dapat ba cover to cover or by chapter? Paano po nyo nai-enjoy yung pagbabasa? Yun lang po. Thank you po.
Sige. So there are two things here, di ba? What advice can I give and how do we read books? I mean, my library is very big because, I mean, it's 40 years of collecting. But the thing here is, people enter my library. Of course, the standard question, nabasa mo na ba lahat yan, di ba? And I have to explain that that's what they teach us, kasi you get a book, you read it cover to cover. Some books you read cover to cover. Some books I just need a citation, so I only read a page. So you shift gears, nag-iba tayo. Yung bawat libro, iba yung purpose. So babasahin mo yun. But ang payo ko sa lahat ng, hindi lang mag-aral ng kasaysayan, periodista, kahit sino mag-aaral, ang sikreto talaga, padamihan ng nabasa. Dahil pag marami kang nabasa, marami kang maibibigay. Pag marami kang nabasa, medyo may mabasa kang medyo hindi tama, makikita mo or makakita ka ng totoo. No? So it's basically reading a great deal. My problem today is, nung araw kasi kailangan, it was physically to have the book. Yan ang natutunan ko kasi sila Agoncillo, O.D. Corpus, yan ang kailangan may library ka. Pero alam mo ngayon, hindi nyo na kailangan kasi ang dami nyo nang mada-download na libre. So my library is in an external drive, in a 2 terabyte drive. But the problem is, sa dami nga, hindi ko ma-organize. So I cannot find things when I want them. So the point here, I think the biggest challenge is not just the books, but in order, and this is probably why I cannot write a new history. I try but fail because there is so much secondary material. Yun lang mga journal article, it will take you 10 lifetimes to finish that. So again, how do we write a new history with all the data? So historians complain pag kulang ang datos. Historians also complain pag sobrang dami naman ang datos. But that's the thing, no? In a way, maybe you will find focus, find specialty. I always tell people you should learn another language aside from English and Filipino. My spoken Spanish is bad. My spoken French is bad, but I can read it. So it opens up. I mean, when I taught in Japan, doon ko na-realize there's a place called Jimbocho, which is a book town. Pag pumasok ka, thousands of books, and I felt right away when I entered, a whole universe is close to me because I could not read Japanese. So the point there is, the more languages you can read, the better it is. No, hindi natin mauubos, basahin lahat, pero talagang kailangan lang magbasa ng magbasa habang, lalo na habang bata kayo. Yeah.
Sorry, we're out of time. It's almost 5 o'clock. No? So that, I think, ends the conversation for now, not just for now. Thank you very much, Dr. Ambeth, for sharing your knowledge with us, your chismis about history with us. Thank you very much.
I will sign books outside, but we're all invited to go up to the roof deck, and we can, if you have questions that you were not able to ask here, I'll be glad to answer them upstairs.
Okay. So at this point, we invite Father Bobby for his closing remarks.
Magis, cura personalis, persons for and with others, finding God in all things. These are enduring Jesuit principles that we hope our students will embody so that by the time they leave these halls, they do so in the same way St. Ignatius and his companions did. Ite inflammata omnia, setting the world on fire. Indeed, our graduates have gone boldly into the world, setting it on fire with their gifts and talents. It is this kind of attitude that we hope will stay with our graduates for the rest of their lives. Much has changed over the years, but our Jesuit mission to educate and form young people entrusted to us to bring glory and honor to God and serve others remain the same. And so it is. It is with grateful hearts to have you here with us, for the inaugural Alumni Conversation. Your time turning the tassel may be over, but I think all of us will agree that learning never stops. It is sewn into the fabric of our shared humanity. After all, we are lifelong learners who push ourselves toward becoming the persons we are meant to be. Humans who can generate ripples of change for the betterment of ourselves and the world around us. We extend our heartfelt thanks to you, our alumni, for your presence and participation in this afternoon's conversations. Also, the other guests that we have here. Your contributions have been invaluable in making this event a success. We also express our gratitude to Dr. Ambeth Ocampo, our esteemed faculty member and alumnus, for leading the conversation this afternoon. Our thanks also to the dedicated individuals and officers who have worked tirelessly to organize this inaugural Alumni Conversations. In a way, these conversations are not really new, but a continuation of what we started when we first entered Ateneo de Manila as students. Ateneo has been a place and space for intellectual discovery, creative awakening, and spiritual deepening. Friendships and connections were forged and strengthened throughout these halls, classrooms, and the values we learned, such as compassion, faith, truth, justice, and integrity, are practiced. It is our hope that these conversations will reignite the spirit of connection, inspiration, and collaboration among us. Together, we can work towards creating the positive change we all aspire to see in the world. Hindi lang tayo galing Ateneo, taglay natin ang galing ng pagiging Atenista. Maraming salamat. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much, Father Bobby. This afternoon's event was organized by the School of Social Sciences, headed by its dean, Dr. Bo Peep Akpedunu, on behalf of the Higher Education Cluster, and then also co-organized with the Office of University Development and Alumni Affairs, led by Father Kit. Thank you, Bo Peep, and thank you, Father Kit. As mentioned earlier, the Galing Ateneo, or Galing Ateneo, Alumni Conversations, this is the first one. We continue to put together more conversations with and for you in the near future to give you reasons to come back home to Ateneo on a more regular basis. In the meantime, we truly appreciate sharing your Saturday afternoon with us today. We hope that you found this first salvo of the conversations informative and engaging. Today's conversation will continue over light refreshments on the roof deck of this building. We request now everyone to rise. We close with our singing of our school song, so please everyone rise for the Song of Mary.